and the permissions from the political parties, and it's like the first time I tended to kind of dress pretty casually in my role running Vibe because part of what I thought I was selling was my youthfulness. You know, when I was pitching to a fund or whatever, and part of what I was pitching was, hey, I'm a young person, we're all young people, we're doing cool stuff, you like that, right? But the first time I suited up for Vibe was when I went and met with the press secretaries for the Prime Minister of Australia and the opposition leader and tried to convince them to let us place 18-year-olds on their press buses travelling around with them during the election. And I managed to get that, I managed to pull that off by telling each of them that the other side was really into it. And
very smart.
Yeah, I was like, the Labour Party love this idea, and wouldn't it be a shame if all we had was the Labour Party perspective for young people? You guys want to, and then I'd be like, the Liberal Party are really all over this. You know, they're excited to be talking to young people. You too, right? Yeah.
Communists fucking love us.
So they both agreed. Neither of them wanted for us to be only covering the other side. So we managed to get these 18 and 19-year-olds.
I was about to call you a sellout for putting on a suit. I take it back.
Yeah. Come on now. And so that was I think our greatest triumph in a way, and it completely transformed.
Were you able to then get your news into the mainstream news?
Yeah.
Was this reported on? Did this become the news generation itself?
A little bit. I mean, never as completely societally transformatively as we would have. You know, we like to imagine.
Time.
Yeah. But we did. So not only were they the only youth reporters on the campaign trail, but you know, because normally that's the most senior, most elite political journalists travel with the actually not the very most elite. The very most elite hang out wherever they are, and the politicians come to them. There's a very tiny class of journalists that don't have to go anywhere. But the very next level down are the people who actually travel with the leaders. So not only were we the only youth reporters on the campaign trail, we were actually the only independent media representatives on the campaign trail at all. So we turned ourselves into a resource for the entire independent media sector in Australia. We were servicing, I think, 9 radio stations, including 2 national networks. And like our reporters, our youth reporters, were calling in updates every day to them and being interviewed on air. We serviced a network of street press and student press on campuses. So we really tried to, and we just gave it away. Our purpose was to get these ideas, to get these perspectives in front of as many people as possible.
Big success.
Yeah, and it completely changed the way we thought about the organisation, because it was the first time that we actually went, well, what we have here is an organisation.
Yeah.
It's not just a project and then another project and then another project. We're like, well, all of a sudden, you know, it's 2004, this was pretty cool, but we'd love to do it better next time. What does doing it better next time mean? It means we're still around in 2007.
Right.
You know, the next election's 3 years. So all of a sudden we began thinking about, well, what's it take to still be here, still be doing this work in 3 years from now? And we started getting more serious about actually thinking about how we're actually building an organisation that could sustain, you know, that could pay salaries, that could support people to do this work professionally.
Okay. Great success. Horrible failure. Keep it brief, 30 seconds or less. Time you completely stepped on your dick.
Yeah, brevity. Brevity's not my forte.
You have to work with me on this one.
I mean, there are a bunch of different failures in the sense of things that didn't work the way we wanted them to.
Choose one.
I mean, I don't know if they're very exciting stories. It's just the dynamic of being very reliant on volunteers, having kind of slightly transient staff, like lots of contractors, not a very strong core. There are a couple of projects that we just dropped the ball on. You know, that someone funded us to produce a magazine, and the magazine never eventuated somewhere in the process of one thing to the other. I mean, I'd have to say one of the things I dropped the ball on actually was my succession. It's a really tricky thing to actually hand over an organisation that you've set up.
Right.
And I tried to do that as well as I could, but we had the kind of challenging concept of trying to find someone who was young but ready for that, because one of our rules was all our staff had to be under 30. And it's and we actually had an exemption from the anti-discrimination laws to discriminate on the basis of age, you know. And it's not so uncommon in the sense that women's organisations are allowed to just employ women, religious organisations are allowed to employ, you know, Catholic organisations are allowed to employ Catholics, you know, African American organisations here are allowed to employ African American staff, you know, Indigenous organisations, etc. But it's unusual in the youth field. Most youth organisations are run by well-meaning adults who are doing their best to empower young people. Yeah, and we really wanted our organisation for its form to match its function. Our function was that we wanted to empower young people. So how do we make a form? How do we build an organisation whose form empowers young people? And we do that by only employing young people. But the guy who we found to succeed me just kind of completely fell flat, actually. And the organisation almost went under about 6 months after I left.
Okay.
As he lasted 4 months, he didn't raise a cent. And the organisation never had the operating capital to survive 4 months of no fundraising. So it ran completely out of money. All the staff had to be let go. I mean, there were 4 staff when I left. It wasn't like a huge organisation, but it was, there were 4 of us being paid, and then it's one of those amazing things where this part-timer who was our communications officer was the one who went, this is not happening, we're not letting this go, and she worked for 3 months unpaid, and was then able to start bringing grants in again.
Excellent.
And the organisation is still survive. It's still a bit, it's smaller than it was when I left. It's 2 staff now, and it's cut back a few programs. But it exists, and I'm thrilled about that. But it almost
died.
completely, yeah.
Okay. That would be a horrible failure.
Yeah.
Now, when you were dealing in the past,
We're not going to talk about that. that was off the record.
that was taken completely out of context. I resent it. When you were being forced to cope with the adult world, when you were much younger, you're still a very young and vibrant man, but when you were much younger, how did you deal with that age imbalance? You've probably got you got the old white guy sitting across the table from you, staring you down, saying, "Who's this young punk?" How did you get yourself taken seriously in those situations?
I don't
Not
know.
assume one thing.
Yeah, I mean, which I only did very occasionally. I don't know, I think I had a certain kind of charming arrogance, I think, in the way I approached things. I just expected that everyone would want to listen to me. And then I felt confident that I had interesting things to say and to contribute. And that tended to be, I think, how it worked out. And, you know, there's a certain kind of delight. I have to say, it's been in a way kind of... You get used to being, if I can speak kind of... If I can be very open with everyone, you get used to being kind of this young gun, you know, and everyone's like, you know, the youngest person in the room, and everyone's paying, in a way, extra attention to you. You stand out because you're the youngest person in the room.
What's the young guy going to say?
Yeah, and everyone's kind of hangs on your word to a certain extent. It's almost the opposite effect, you know, like to one extent, once you're able to win a tiny bit of credibility, you kind of hurdle over everyone else in the room because you've got that credibility while being the youngest person in the room. And it's quite a powerful thing, and there's a lot of organizations, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of organizations they represent who love that energy of working with young, naive, idealistic, energetic people. And I kind of miss that a little bit, I have to say. I mean, you know, I was running an organization by my mid-20s, and, you know, kind of been invited to lots of conferences and meeting with government ministers, and, you know, been involved in conversations about the structure of the federal government's youth consultative process and these fairly high-level conversations. And, you know, now I'm a 30-year-old with a really good job in an important organisation, but I'm kind of middle management, and I kind of feel like I've fallen back to where you'd expect me to be. You know, I'm doing all right. I'm still young-ish, and I have a good job-ish, but but it's no longer, you know, just to be completely honest with you, like I no longer feel as exceptional as I once did. And I have to say, there's something about letting that go to a certain extent, and being okay with not being the exception, but still doing what you do well.
Excellent. Very good point. There's nothing more pathetic than someone who tries to be that young, brash go-getter when they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s. Come on.
Yeah.
I mean, you do a great job.
Some people, you know, better than others, anyway.
Aging gracefully is a skill that's important to
That's
learn.
all about, right?
Or you become a pathetic joke. And I think we all know a few pathetic jokes out there. So, you had all this organizational experience. You did some great things at a young age. What did you gain personally from your experience?
I don't know. I gained everything. I don't know. It's you know, there were all these ideas I had, and somehow I was always able to find people who wanted to